It matters not what someone is born, but what they grow to be. Perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. There are all kinds of courage. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. If you recognize these quotes, then you must be a Harry Potter fan. J.K. Rowling published her first Harry Potter book in 1997, and the world changed from that moment on. This series is loved by so many people. It's turned into a movie franchise. There's a theme park at Universal Studios for this series. And so I've invited some of my friends today to talk a little bit about our love for Harry Potter and talk about some of the connections that we see between Harry Potter and the Christian faith. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Methodical Methodist podcast. I am your host, the Reverend Andrew Lay, and if you like the show, I hope that you might take a minute to subscribe, rate, and write a review for the podcast. It helps to boost the show and make it to where more people can find it. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/methodicalpod, and you can also find me on Instagram as well. My handle is at methodicalpod, so be sure to check me out. All right, I am so glad to be joined by my good friends Matthew Huff and Scott McPherson on the podcast today. They joined me last year back in episode 18 when we talked about the Lord of the Rings, and they have returned to talk about another beloved series called Harry Potter. I know a lot of folks have been emailing me, calling me, showing up at my house saying, when are these guys going to come back on? We've just been waiting. And now finally here you are. So thank you guys so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It is great to be back. We know our fans were clamoring for our point of view.
Yeah, glad to be back. I've showed this to several people, and they're like, "Wow, you're a massive nerd." I'm like, yeah, I know.
I did have some comments after that episode aired. And folks were like, man, your friends know a lot about that.
Yeah, it's actually amazing that we all have significant others.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. The fact that we are able to function in society at all is really a miracle in itself. But I want to preface this episode very similar to the way I prefaced that last episode. And that is to say that we are not authoritative scholars on the subject, but it's something that we just enjoy. This series. Also, I know the author J.K. Rowling has been at the center of a lot of controversy lately. I don't think we're here to talk about that, but we're just here to talk about the boy who lived, Harry Potter. And so I thought we'd just jump right in with a really easy, simple question. What do you love most about this series? What is it that draws you into this story?
It's a real softball, Andrew, to start it off. I will say that I love, I grew up reading these books, and then I watched the movies. But if the books were my first introduction to this world. And I think what drew me the most to the world were the characters inside of it. The very vastly unique and interesting people, and then also the actual world itself, like the physical magical world with all the spells and the Quidditch and dragons and all that stuff. It's when you're reading it as a child, there's a lot of just cool stuff to imagine, and that's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've just seen the movies. No, I'm just kidding. I've, there's always these people like, "Oh, I love Harry Potter." I'm like, "Oh, what? You read the books?" I'm like, "Nope, just seen the movies." I'm like, "Well, you don't really know anything." But I think now what brings me back is just like that nostalgia. Like you're watching a movie and you remember that first time you saw it, and you're like, wow, I remember going to the theater at midnight, like seeing all the people dressed up, and then like when you reread a book, you just kind of think back to that night you were at Books a Million, and just kind of draws you back. But I think initially it's just like how well she like built the world, like how it's so expansive, and just kind of how, I mean, there, like, you kind of knew what to expect every book. Like, he would go through his school, and then, Voldemort would be ever so kind to wait to the end to like do all of his stuff. And like, it was just such a great like world, and just she built it so well, and you could just kind of put yourself as a kid in Harry's shoes and be like, I could be that guy, if magic were real, which it's not. But if you, in case you didn't know. But yeah,
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert, there's no such thing as magic. But yeah, it's just kind of the world in general.
I guess I should preface by saying I've never actually read the books or watched the movies. I'm more of the Fantastic Beasts fan.
Oh, yeah, okay. Interesting. That'd be a weird way to jump into that world.
No. I love the books. I love the movies. One of the things that I've really appreciated about this series, especially the books, is that I read some of them as a child, and then I came back and reread them all, and finished off the series as an adult. And what I love about that is that series really holds up. Like it's great for kids, it's great for adults. Like it's just such a wonderful series for all ages, for everybody. I was in seminary when I reread through the first couple, and then I think initially I read like through 5, and I don't know why I stopped, but I finished it off when I was in seminary. And so I was reading all this really deep theology, and I just needed a break, and was reading Harry Potter. It was just kind of a great way to escape. You just really get sucked into that world. And I made Allie read all the books. She had never read them before. And so after I had finished it again, we got married, and she was like, I've never read them. And I was like, oh, you have to read these. These are so good. And so she kind of got sucked into that world too. But speaking of the books and the movies, do you have one that you prefer? Do you prefer the books, or do you prefer the movies?
I obviously, I think anytime the movies are on, like, I'm going to probably sit down and watch them. I got them on Blu-ray. Like I'll like put it on, just kind of like some white noise or, something like that. But there's a lot of other things to watch and read and stuff like that. So I've only read them and then reread them, like, so I basically read the books twice. And, I just think the books just have so much more like information, and like, it's just more of a complete story in the book. So, I would have to say I like the books more, but I feel like I consume more of the movies, if that makes sense. Like, they both have their like purpose, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely, I love the books. I've read them several times through. But I did, back in the day when we used to go dress up and see the midnight premiere of a Harry Potter film, that was a lot of fun. Actually, I remember they used to have midnight releases for the books.
Oh yeah.
And there would be lines outside of Books a Million and Barnes and Noble for like an hour. And I never did that. I'm not a crazy person, but I don't know if there ever will be a book series that will have that kind of attention as far as people willing to stand in line for it. But I love the books. I think the movies are fine. I'm a bit of a film snob, as my friends say, but I think they could be better. But it's just so hard to get all that information into a movie. But yeah, and I think I love like all the adult actors in the movies. I love Alan Rickman as Snape; he's really good. But the books are there's just so much more fun to me.
Yeah. So as we're talking about waiting in line for these books, Matt, I know you have a story about a buddy of yours.
Yeah.
You just got to share that story.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, and this is known between us, but I'm the king of ruining things. One of our friends, Jared, he was reading the books, and I kept just like ruining it. Like, oh, is that part? Like, he's like, dude, I haven't read that yet. But one of my friends is the king. He taught me. It was in the Half-Blood Prince. Everyone was like waiting, to get their books at Books A Million, and there's like hundreds of people there. And one of my buddies, who will go unnamed, he must not be named. He went to the very back of the books and read the part where, spoiler, Dumbledore dies, and screamed it out in all of Books A Million, and like people were like chasing him out the door, like trying to murder him. It was quite the scene, but I thought it was really funny. So.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. Oh man, yeah. Spoiler alert for. I guess just a disclaimer: if you haven't read the books or watched the movies, like, first of all, just why are you doing this?
You're not spoiling a podcast, especially why would you listen to this if you don't know it's already happened?
Yes. Please stop. Go read all of them, watch the movies, and then come back and listen to this.
Yeah. We've already spoiled a major thing, but from now on, just general spoilers.
Here on out. Unless you like spoilers, and then,
then just stay tuned for more.
Yeah. So one of the major themes that we see I think more in the book, but it's in the movies too, are the houses. You've got Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. It's kind of an interesting backstory about the founders of Hogwarts. These characters that help come together to kind of found the school. But out of these 4 houses, each of them kind of have their own characteristics. Which one do you belong to, and why?
I am 100% a Gryffindor, and if they're mostly, and it's hard to talk about this without stereotyping people, but we're going to do that because you divide people into 4 categories, so that's what we're going to do. But most Gryffindors are more center of attention-y. They like what's the word I'm looking for? Like human interaction. They value that. They value friendship. Not just that, but they like to have fun. They're usually larger than life. I also really love Fred and George. I thought that the 3 of us would have a great time at Hogwarts. So, but yeah, I would say for sure Gryffindor. I feel like I would fit in. And it is interesting when you meet people that, these books are so part of our collective childhood that you can pretty much meet someone for the first time and ask them what their Harry Potter house is. And they're like, oh, I'm a Ravenclaw. Like, okay, I get that. I know I know what kind of person you are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm house non-conforming. No, I'm just kidding. That would be if the books were written in 2021. But my Twitter and Instagram handles say Matt Hufflepuff, and it's just a play on words. I don't really think I'm much of a Hufflepuff. I've done these Pottermore things and these BuzzFeed quizzes, and despite my, I always seem to be getting, Gryffindor every single time. And I think that's pretty right on the money. I mean, everyone wants to be in Gryffindor or whatever, but, I think it's a certain personality type. And, I'm probably not smart enough to be in Ravenclaw. I'm not boring enough to be a Hufflepuff, and I'm not evil. So, I think that's just, I'd probably be in Gryffindor if I had to be in one.
I actually think that although our 3, our main characters in Harry Potter are Gryffindor, most people that are not Gryffindors are like, please stop. Like they have really, they're like, we get it, just enough.
Yeah.
What about you, Andrew?
You know, this one's tough for me. I've done like the quizzes, and I always end up being a Ravenclaw, and I don't think it's because I'm smart. And I'm definitely not smart enough to be in Ravenclaw, but I think it's because I'm so reserved, and I've been accused of being an introvert. I don't know if y'all would agree with that or not, but
Right, but you are smart, but more importantly, you value knowledge, right? You enjoy the pursuit of knowledge, and you like to read a lot. You like to write, and I think you're generally, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks as a Ravenclaw. So
yeah,
I
again,
think people get hung up on the fact that like I have to be this one trait, in order to be a Gryffindor or a Slytherin or whatever. And
Have you
Matt made a joke about Slytherin being evil, but they're you could be ambitious and cunning without being necessarily
Yeah.
evil.
right?
definitely have either of you done the Pottermore one?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, apparently that's like supposed to be like the definitive like one you are, but I think you whatever you want to be, man. It's 2021.
Right, and that's what one of the points of the Sorting Hat, which is the magical hat that you have to wear, and it tells you what and the hat told Harry that he'd be a great Slytherin, like he'd be great at it. And you see, there's moments in the story when you realize why that would be true. But the Sorting Hat took into account his choice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you've got Neville Longbottom, who's a Gryffindor, who typically you would not, judging a book by its cover, you would not play Neville in Gryffindor. I would.
It'd be a squib.
So there's a sense of you've got these houses, but it's not the end all be all. You may have certain characteristics, but it doesn't define, who you are.
I will say, if I had a critique of the way she divided up the houses, I think she put too much emphasis on like Slytherin being nefarious or evil, and I don't think that's the case. I wish she had done a little bit more to show that not all of them are just like general garbage.
Yeah.
But I'm not a writer, so I'll email JK my thoughts.
Really, and y'all can help me out with this maybe. One of the only decent Slytherin folks that I can think of would be like Slughorn, Professor Slughorn, who's like maybe not the greatest character, maybe he's not the most trustworthy, but he's not evil by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I think he has good intentions. I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Can y'all think of any other characters that are Slytherin that are, decent people?
Not that anyone that obviously Snape, he was a Slytherin, but and that's kind of to Scott's point. She really didn't do a good job of like having like just like normal. I'm sure there were, and like I'm sure if you went on the Harry Potter wiki, you could like find a bunch of Slytherins who were like actually, and this is kind of going deep in the weeds. Merlin was actually in Slytherin. It was like in the Harry Potter universe, Merlin went to Hogwarts and he was a Slytherin. So, obviously, like through the ages, I'm sure you can find several good Slytherins, but at least at the time, Harry was there, because they even made like everybody on like the Slytherin like Quidditch team like a jerk.
Yeah.
It seems to be like, I don't know, maybe just the time that the Harry was there, and you have all the the Voldemort stuff going on, and of course Harry's son Albus Severus Potter got put into Slytherin, with Malfoy's son.
Is that canonical? That's from the dark. Was that the Dark Child or whatever?
Yeah, I think it is that canon. It was written by J.K. Rowling. Like, is it canon?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm. I mean, I would think that if she wrote it and said it, it would. I mean, who else would? You know what I mean? Like she
Yeah, I
kind
don't
of
know. Yeah,
created the world. Kind of like Tolkien. You have all these extra things that he added and wrote about that world of Lord of the Rings. I think in a similar vein, you've got J.K. Rowling even now expanding on some of that stuff.
yeah, especially now with Fantastic Beasts. I mean, they're going to do like allegedly like 3 more movies, like up until like 1945. Like, I mean, there's no telling. But like, and like obviously, I don't want to critique someone who wrote such a beloved series, but like sometimes like J.K. can't even get her own like story right. Sometimes like she put like Professor McGonagall at Hogwarts in the last Fantastic Beast movie. She wasn't even alive yet.
Mm.
Like some of the timeline stuff like gets kind of messed up and wonky when you like try to go back and like do all these revisions and stuff.
Right. And you're getting to a point where, like, if let's say you do get to 1945, there was a pretty big part of history that it would be really weird for the wizards to not take a stand for,
Right.
And
Yeah.
like, so to me, you'd have to justify them not just apparating to Germany and like jinxing Hitler. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, that's I guess when you think of that kind of stuff, like magic can pretty much solve any problem. So
Yeah.
like I don't know, maybe there's some sort of laws they have to, but the laws could be, I don't know, it's like plot armor kind of. It's like
Maybe they didn't. Maybe it's a different timeline where like World War II didn't happen
yeah, I mean
because they
yeah,
don't mention the Chicago Bulls one time in the books, and the Chicago Bulls were on a tear in the '90s, and not one mention of them were in the book. So maybe there's a world where there's no World War II, there's no Michael Jordan.
Yep. I mean, just because it's
Yeah.
on Earth doesn't mean it has to be our Earth.
That's true.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, we've already mentioned a lot of the characters in this series, but we have so many beloved characters. You got Ron and Hermione and Harry and Hagrid and Dumbledore, Snape, Dobby, Draco, Voldemort. All these characters, good and bad, characters we love, characters we hate. Which character do you most identify with and why?
We probably have to go with, Ron. I feel like Ron. I mean, he's just like, he's just the best friend. He's just always there for his bud, and I don't really have main character syndrome like some people do in this world. I'm not, I don't mind to, take a back seat and, be that number 2 guy. And, Ron's always there. He always kind of, is like the humor of the bunch, kind of just, cracking jokes. And, he's not as funny as his brothers, obviously, but, he's a wisecracker and, always got some funny things to say. And, he outkicks his coverage on who he marries. And I've done that as well. So, and I have red hair. So, me and Ron, I mean, Ron is just like, I mean, him ending up with Hermione is a travesty. I mean, but, but I guess she always has, maybe she likes projects. I don't know. But yeah, definitely Ron for me.
Mine is a bit of a two-parter, which I know is kind of cheating. But first, I'm going to say Fred and George as one character because they're just, to me, they're so funny and they love just having a good time despite anything else, really. Like sometimes to a fault, which I definitely identify with. But even with their being silly, they're incredibly loyal to their family and their friends. And they're incredibly just gifted wizards, which I really think is interesting. So that's my first one. And the second one would be Hagrid, who does not get enough proclaim, just throwing it out there. Hagrid is great. He's the first magical person that introduces Harry to the world. And from then on, I've always loved Hagrid. I don't know. He's a giant, which is fun. He likes animals sometimes without realizing that they're dangerous to other people. But yeah, he's great. He's not the brightest fellow, which I also identify with, but he has a very big heart, literally. But he just really cares very deeply about his family and friends, and that's pretty cool.
So for me, this is going to be this is tough. I've been thinking about this one for a while, and if I had to pick one, it would probably be Mr. Weasley.
He's so great though.
Just because he's just so dorky, and yeah, I don't know.
Have you ever thought about how bad Mr. Weasley must be at his job? I mean, this guy's supposed to know about Muggle stuff, and he has absolutely no clue about anything. It's like, how are you this bad at your job, and yet you're the director of like the Muggle, whatever he is.
Yeah,
it makes no sense.
Maybe I want to change my answer.
Well, I mean, you got to think like somebody brought up in like a Muggle household, like found out they're a wizard, like surely they would be more equipped for that job. I mean, like,
yeah, this is where you get in some of the more plot holy part of the universe, but that's okay. You just kind of roll with it because though he is kind of a dork, but he's very courageous, and he's very lovable too. Like I think J.K. Rowling did a great job of having so many characters, but giving them all like important things to do. That's really tough to do in a series.
Yeah, and like in like the first few books, like Ron's dad's not in the first one, but in the second book, he's like a mega dork, like asking questions about rubber duckies. And then as the series goes along and things with Voldemort get more serious, like he himself becomes a more serious character. And like, when he's confronting, I mean, even in the third one, when he's confronting Harry about, Sirius Black, like, he's very stern and very fatherly and like not joking around. Like, I mean, like the depth of these characters and how they've advanced through the books is, something really incredible that she was able to do.
Yeah, there's some really great character development, even with some of not the main characters. Neville Longbottom. Like, wow, what a transition from the first book to the last book.
And with the actor as well.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Matthew Lewis had a blow up, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Matt, this isn't a thirst trap, okay? We're trying to keep this professional.
My bad.
Well, that actually leads me to my next question, which is, which actor is your favorite in the movies?
It's good. It's a good question. I just think Tom Felton played Draco so well. I mean, he's just a total slime ball from start to finish. And when he was having his character development, you saw that a lot when he was asked to kill Dumbledore, and he was struggling with that, and you really see this like kind of Weasley kid, kind of a turd, and then like you find out that he's actually not that bad of a guy. Like he actually like him and his dad Lucius, like they're the only true Death Eaters that ever knew love, right? So that's what saved him. Like Lucius's love for his son and his family is the reason why he abandoned Voldemort, and Draco loved his family and really wasn't a killer. Like he's just not really that bad of a guy. So you find like Draco's kind of like the secondary antagonist, but you find out like he's really not a bad guy, the whole time. But like Tom Felton was able to do that so well and show that on screen.
Tom Felton was like the original Joffrey, like just a character that everyone could despise, but the person himself is probably fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Oh,
Tom
they-
Felton's nice.
Oh yeah, he's done like several like documentaries about Harry Potter and like shows, and like I don't think there's a nicer guy out there. But they say Rupert Grint is so nice that you can literally see him on the street, like, "Hey Rupert, you want to go back to my house and hang out?" And he would literally do it.
Wow.
Like he will not say no to people. Like it's it's pretty wild.
Probably not very safe.
No, not at all. I think like Daniel and Tom have both had conversations with him, like, "Hey, like, you know, if somebody could like kill you one day,
Yeah.
like you probably need to not go home with people you don't know." But
Some
apparently he's
crazy
just so
person
nice.
will just like, we're gonna reenact Harry Potter together.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Misery situation, you know.
Yes. I think, Alan Rickman, like I mentioned him earlier, but he is you cannot imagine a better Snape. At least I can't, I think he played the role of Snape just absolutely perfectly. He was sarcastic when he needed to be. He was incredibly mean, but then he was, he just brought so much life to that character. And I think they also did a good job of kind of showing early on that Snape, in the movies at least, wasn't a total bag of garbage.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alan Rickman just for sure crushes that role.
Oh man, so good.
Have you guys ever wondered what Richard Harris would have been like if he would have lived past the second movie?
Yes, I think about that a lot. Not a lot, but Michael Gambon as Dumbledore was not good to me. He totally missed the point of Dumbledore.
You know who would have been really good instead of Jude Law in the Fantastic Beasts as Dumbledore is Richard Harris's son that was in Chernobyl. What's his name?
Oh yes.
Dwayne Harris.
No.
Hart Harris.
No. Hang on. Because I was watching Chernobyl
Jared.
and I was listening.
Jared Harris.
Yes.
Yep.
Jared Harris.
I was half right, just so you know.
And I like if you listen to Chernobyl and listen to Jared Harris talk like in Chernobyl and close your eyes, I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds exactly like Dumbledore. Like he sounds exactly like his dad did. And like I think that would have been like the perfect role for him. But apparently he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to like that's his dad's role. Like he didn't want to. I don't know, but I think he'd have been perfect in it. Jude Law, I don't really like Jude Law, so anyway,
That would have been really great. I agree. That would have been really a really good role for him. But I get it. I liked Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid. I thought
he's great.
he
He's
was
really
lovable, and he just striked the right tone for everything. Like his love for Harry.
Yeah, he brought a very big personality to a very big character, and I think he filled the shoes very well.
Yeah, kind of like
Definitely.
what you said about Snape. Like, can you picture somebody else playing that role? And I have a hard time coming up with somebody that I think would have done better or as good of a job as him. So, one of the things that I really appreciate about this series is kind of this wizarding world that J.K. Rowling was able to create. So expansive and just such a massive thing. But what were some of the things in the world that stick out to you? And what do you find interesting about this world that J.K. Rowling was able to create in the books and visually in the movies?
First of all, I love sports, so the Quidditch always really set well. The World Cup scene, a lot of people don't like that, or they don't, that chapter in the book, but I love it. I love it so much.
That they do a pretty good job of like explaining like how it can coexist with like the normal world, like how okay, like they got all these like spells that keep them secret and stuff like that. And I think another thing I really enjoy about the Wizarding World is the animals. I think all these, all these mythological creatures that have, came to life, and it's nice to see them on the screen. It's nice to read about them. And, J.K. Rowling she did such a good job of like doing her research on like all these animals and, just like magic folklore in general.
Yeah. And they're not just like dragons and unicorns. There's also nifflers and all kinds of weird creatures, which are really cool.
Well, in the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry refers to Voldemort as you-know-who, and he who will not be named. And this is something that a lot of the characters do out of fear of Voldemort. But Dumbledore, at one point in the book, tells Harry to always use a proper name for things. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. So what do y'all think about that whole relationship between this fear of Voldemort, of fear of saying his name, and how do you see this theme of fear in the series? And then how do we see Harry slowly kind of combat that fear?
It's a deep question. I find it interesting about, this is kind of like one of these plot hole things. Like, Harry had no idea who Voldemort was, and like Hagrid told him, and then like he just kept saying it. Like, I mean, like Harry was kind of never really afraid of him. He always like called him by his first name, and like it's interesting because like Hermione, who grew up in a Muggle household, even she was afraid to say his name. So I always thought that was kind of peculiar, but I think as the series goes on, and I think Harry and some of the other characters did a good job of like strengthening the wizards around him to realize like, hey, to confront this guy, we certainly can't confront him if we can't even say his name. So I think, as the series went on, Harry and other people just kind of convinced people and basically gave them like the will, not the will to fight back, but just kind of like basically turned the tide on him being like the scariest person ever, I guess. And I always thought it was really cool that, Dumbledore always just called him Tom, which is like the biggest insult to him. Yeah. Like, he wanted to be called Voldemort. He's fine with he must not be named, but he certainly didn't want to be called Tom. Yeah. So like Harry called him Tom and Dumbledore called him Tom just to kind of spite him, which I always enjoyed that part of the series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think Voldemort wanted his name to be that fear, and to have that type of, he's so scary that you can't say his name. And I think that gives him a lot of power over people. And I think that, obviously Harry he's never afraid to say it, but everyone, I think it all, despite Harry being the victim of Voldemort, like one of the victims, he also had no clue the real impact of Voldemort throughout his life, like he was totally sheltered from that living with the Dursleys. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's a unique perspective to be unafraid of that, but I don't think it allows for it's a non-experience, right? He did not experience the level of chaos and menace and just sheer terror that Voldemort did cause. Yeah. But I will say, I think that being afraid of something so much to where you can't say it out loud is just, giving him too much power. Mm-hmm. Too much power. And then, like Matt was saying, if you call him Tom, you take away that identity. Voldemort has crafted his identity to be Voldemort. Voldemort's as much of a facade, a mask, as it is a real, his real identity. It's a larger than life being. So I think they do it, as they get older, obviously the characters are afraid, but they seem to really grow into the fact that not only are they have each other, but they have lots of other people to not be afraid of.
Yeah.
And that, trying to take away that power from Voldemort is important.
And Harry's unique in the sense that he is the only person to have ever survived an attack from Voldemort. Now, both of his parents died. So, I mean, we could argue that because Harry survived, his parents were killed. And now, when Voldemort does return and Harry learns about that, we could argue that Harry has the most to fear out of Voldemort, because who is Voldemort going to want to get more than anybody else? Because Harry represents, I think, a weakening of Voldemort's power. Obviously, weakening him physically.
I think Harry's biggest thing is like he's just not afraid to die. Like, I think Andrew's frozen. You're back. Okay. Yeah, I just think Harry's just, I'm like, Harry's the master of death, and he just doesn't care to die. So I think that like lack of fear of dying or anything like that, or I think he acknowledges several times that he's afraid, but it's almost like he's like compelled to do something, like even though he's afraid. So I think Harry's in a unique spot where even though he definitely has the most fear, he seems to tackle his fear extremely well. For the most part.
I always thought it was really interesting that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Matt.
Oh no, I was going to say something stupid. So just go ahead.
No, now I want to hear it.
Oh no, I forgot what I was going to say. You go ahead, Scott.
I just was going to say that I think it's interesting that Professor Lupin never was afraid of saying Voldemort's name either. I thought that was interesting. A small part of the story that is kind of interesting to kind of think about.
I don't think Sirius Black was afraid to, now that I think about it.
I don't remember.
I think he said it. Obviously. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go back and view that. But yeah, Lupin seemed to never care.
Yeah.
I don't know. Lupin's got bigger problems. The man turns into a werewolf every, 3 or 4 days out of the month.
Yeah.
He's got bigger issues. He's pretty much already dead inside anyway.
Yeah, that's going to change your perspective a little bit on things.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Well, then in the Chamber of Secrets, we find out that Slytherin, like one of the original founders of Hogwarts, wanted Hogwarts to be a school for only full-blooded wizards. He didn't want any people known as mudbloods, which were people who were had human blood as well as wizard blood. And so, as we're thinking about that and looking at our world today, how might this ideology compare with real prejudices that people have throughout history or even right now in the world?
I mean, there's all kinds of things we could compare it to. I mean, just look at the Afghanistan crisis and people's concern with refugees, And I'm not trying to make a point either way. Just people are afraid of that, if they're different or whatever. So, I mean, and it's a mindset that's been permeated throughout history. It's not like it's a new thing that she touched on. People have been always finding reasons to, I don't know, separate themselves from others for bad purposes.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to take it way out of left field here. Have you ever seen the movie Halloween Town 3? Okay. And
way out of left field.
Yeah. And Halloween Town 3, like they let the monsters and stuff like go into the real world. So like normal people can go into like magic school. Like, I mean, come on now, let's open Hogwarts to everybody, even though I can't do magic and couldn't do anything, they don't need to exclude me just because I can't do magic. I'm still waiting on my letter. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think people, all kidding aside, I think people just kind of, they're afraid of what's different, and they try to just surround themselves with people that are like them, and then when people come in and who aren't like them, they don't really care for it too much. And some people don't care that much, and some people care a lot. And Slytherin's one of these guys that seem to have cared a lot. And look at him, he's dead. So
and now he's dead.
so his ideology didn't last. It was carried on through a few people, but I'll be interested to see. And obviously this will be up to J.K. Rowling, but this is what a lot of people who read the books don't really understand, is because there's no chronological, there's no that word in the movies. Like, you have no idea what year it is at any time. Like, there's no year, and the only way you know what year it is because the Nearly Headless Nick, his 500th day death day party was in 1992. So that means Harry started Hogwarts in 1991. So, it would be interesting to see like what the Wizarding World looks like, and not the Cursed Child, but, something else, in 2021. Like, what's Hogwarts look like in 2021? I don't know. So,
yeah. Well, one of the other themes in the book that we learned probably obviously the most about in the last book is this idea of the Deathly Hallows. And there are 3 items that make up the Deathly Hallows. We have the Elder Wand, which makes you invincible, the Resurrection Stone, which can return a lost loved one, and the Invisibility Cloak, which can obviously make you invisible. So which of these 3 would you choose?
I think the Resurrection Stone would just make you sad. Like, you could bring your loved ones back, but you could never like hold them again or anything like that. Kind of the downfall of the Peveril guy that crafted it. As far as the Elder Wand, I mean that that's okay. But I feel like I'd probably be a good wizard anyway, so I probably wouldn't really need it. But like, I feel like the Invisibility Cloak would be good, but I feel like I would just want to do like illegal stuff with it, like rob banks, like steal stuff. So I think as far as like an ethical thing, I don't think that. I mean, there's several times I want to be invisible, but I mean, I just want to be invisible to do illegal stuff. So so I guess I would probably take neither. I don't want any of them because they would just lead to trouble. Like, all of them would lead to trouble.
Yeah, I think you could do the most good with the Elder Wand, but it also has a history of violence with it too. Like, eventually someone will come along and kill you and take the wand from you. Someone better than you.
Yeah.
So
it has the most potential to do the most damage too. It could do the most good, but it could do the most damage at the same time.
Yeah, and it's it's not unbeatable too, because even with the Elder Wand, Dumbledore was able to beat Grindelwald, and of course we don't know how that looked like, how it happened. Apparently, it was like a 4-hour wand battle, which, I mean, how they're going to put that on the on the silver screen, I don't know. But apparently that's 3 Fantastic Beasts away, so we'll have to wait until 2030 to figure that out.
that's so many movies.
Yeah, I think they want to make like 4 or 5 of them. And the actors are all adults, so I guess they're really not on like a crunch timeline like they were with the other movies. They were trying to get Harry Potter done before he was a full-grown 30-year-old male.
Well, one of the most complex characters that we see in Harry Potter is the character Snape. We've already talked a little bit about him already, but at one point in the story, Snape is a Death Eater. He's a follower of Voldemort. But then we see him later on in the series working with Dumbledore in order to defeat Voldemort. So what do you think Snape's story tells us about humanity? What lessons do we learn looking at Snape's story and this idea of redemption?
I think Snape is a great character. I think it's a bit much that he bullies Harry for most of the books. That's a bit excessive, dude. But I think his arc is really just, it's redemptive, I mean, he made a huge mistake by telling Peter Pettigrew where the Potters were hiding, and that ended up killing them. And I think that he has lived with that guilt and shame for his entire life, but he was still able to do something good. And it didn't, it would be very easy for that guilt to consume you and make you a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Which Snape has is, he's meant to be a bad person when you first meet him, but he's just all doing it for the greater good.
Yeah, I think Snape's obviously a very complex character, and actually I got a funny story about Snape real quick. I got to tell it. It's somebody that didn't read the books but watch the movies, and they have that flashback scene in the last movie where Harry actually sees that Snape was working, pretty much a good guy the whole entire time. And my buddy and his friend walked out of the movie. He's like, "Wow, I can't believe this whole time Snape was Harry's dad." He's like, "No, that's not what happened." But Snape's love for Lily pretty much drove his whole character. And you see a guy that loved Lily even though she rejected him for Harry's dad. And obviously he never liked Harry's dad, even when he died. Like, he's not mending fences about that. But his love for Lily basically drove like his love for Harry and like his good guy arc. Like, and that kind of brings me back to another point. Like, Death Eaters are apparently incapable of love, but you see Snape and Malfoy's, they can love. And then anyone that has any sort of love can like sort of break Voldemort's like control over them. And yeah, Snape's a good character.
Something you just said really leads me to my next question, this idea of love. And you said anybody that has love can kind of defeat Voldemort. So if we think about Voldemort being defeated because of Lily's love for Harry, then do you think we should empathize with him? Because he clearly doesn't have any love in his life. And, we learn a little bit about his history. He was an orphan. He never really had any true friends. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he's a tragic figure in that way? Or was he asking for this?
Yeah, man, just kind of a backstory on Voldemort's birth. Like, basically, his mom was a witch. She was a Gaunt, and she crafted a love potion and like Voldemort's dad was a very rich, successful Muggle, and Miss Gaunt fell in love, and she crafted a love potion, and then after the love potion wore off, like I think the Gaunt lady was like a recluse and weird, and like she left Tom, and then the dad didn't want it because like it was like the child of basically a trick. So right from the very get go, Voldemort had a rough go. He was born in the orphanage, but what he became is a pretty evil guy. So it's hard to really empathize with him too much, but he definitely had all the tinder to light that fire. And if he was loved starting out and wasn't rejected by the people that were supposed to love him, then yeah, he'd be good. But there's also a lot of orphans that don't like go on like massive killing sprees. So he took a bad situation that it was of no fault of his own and just took it to the worst possible way he could. So maybe like a 5%, you can't blame him, but like a 95%, like, dude, you kind of went the wrong way on that.
I definitely agree. Like, there are plenty of red flags in his childhood, but at a certain point, you have to be held accountable for your own actions. There are plenty of serial killers who had good childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also plenty of them who had terrible childhoods. But that that's wrong to kill someone, right? At a certain point, you do. So, I think that maybe if Voldemort had some better mentoring when he was young and could have channeled that ambition into something better, maybe it would have turned out differently. But then we wouldn't be having a podcast. So
True. Well, when I talked to Allie about doing this podcast, she said you really have to ask this one particular question. So it kind of has a little bit of a lead into the question. But two of the most intriguing characters in the book are Dumbledore and Snape. And throughout most of the series, Dumbledore always seems to be the one who is looking out for Harry. He always seems to have Harry's best interest at heart. And then you got Snape, who always seems to be picking on Harry. He always has it out for Harry. He almost seems to despise Harry. But at the end of the series, we see some of the true intentions of these characters come to light. So what do you make of this? Who do you think was really looking out for Harry's best interest more? At one point, Dumbledore says that at the right time, Harry must die. And then Snape says, kind of with disgust, you've been raising this boy for slaughter. So what do you think about these characters and their relationship to Harry and their true intentions?
I think that's a big question. I think Dumbledore had the right intentions, but he was vastly misguided by his own hubris sometimes. But I really do think that Dumbledore, at the end of the day, cared deeply for Harry. But at the same time, Dumbledore knew that at a certain point, Harry was the last Horcrux. And so I think that Dumbledore valued destroying Voldemort over Harry sometimes. Not to say he doesn't care about him, but I think that his great wizardry kind of got in the way of him sometimes. But Snape, at the end of the day, was constantly looking out for Harry. Whether when in the first book, when his broomstick starts going crazy, and you find out that you think it's Snape trying to jinx Harry, but it's really Quirrell. Snape was trying to do the counter curse. Snape has the only reason, which I think is also selfish. Snape has a selfish motivation to protect Harry. Mm-hmm. So they're both acting in their own self-interest. So it's hard. It's hard to say. I think Snape generally dislikes Harry, and Voldemort does like him, but they both are guided by their own self-interest.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think Dumbledore. I think after he saw Tom Riddle's diary in the Chamber of Secrets, he knew that something was going on. So it'd be interesting to know like when exactly. Dumbledore knew that Harry was a Horcrux, and like when he sort of figured out like, hey, this guy's going to sacrifice himself. And did he know that when he did die, he would be able just to like the only part of him would die would be the Horcrux, and he would continue to live on. So, did Dumbledore know any of this stuff? Did he not? I think that plays a factor in it.
Right.
But, I think Dumbledore realized that, Harry has to do this. He has to do this. And, I think Dumbledore just kind of thought he was, the guy to do it. And, how selfless he is. And, sometimes you got to make sacrifices and I think that Dumbledore thought that Harry might do it. Of course, Dumbledore could have known the whole time that when Harry died, it would actually just be his Horcrux and he would get to come back. But again, I'm not sure. And then as far as Snape, I think Snape, part of Snape's hatred of Harry, I think it had to do partly with his cover, right? Because he probably knew at some point he would have to go back in the fold and be a Death Eater again. To be this double agent. And I just think that if he would have been buddy and chummy with Harry, I think that would have definitely kind of blown it. They're like, dude, you're over here fraternizing with the enemy. I think people wouldn't have believed him as much if people knew anything about him and Lily. So maybe he had to be a jerk on purpose, or, you know, maybe every time he saw Harry, he saw Harry's dad, because they look very similar apparently. And he, you know, and he had this like contempt for him because he looked like his dad, and Harry's the byproduct of the woman he loved and some other dude. So, you know, maybe that played a part too. Hard to say, but you know, I think there's a lot going on in that question, but I tried to answer it the best I could.
Oh, yeah, it's a tough one.
Andrew started with some easy ones, and now he's ending the night with some pretty like deep questions about Harry Potter world.
Yeah, and questions like maybe you don't have, you know, a real answer. You know, we may not really know true intentions deep down, what's going on in these characters.
Yeah.
I do get the sense that Dumbledore, you know, he sacrificed himself. He had a need to do things for the greater good. In order to defeat Voldemort, he took it upon himself to try to find these Horcruxes and destroy them, taking Harry along with him for some of it. So I think Dumbledore started out that mission, took Harry along with him, and then really relied on Harry to carry out the end of that. Dumbledore, I think, knew that he could take it up to a certain point, but couldn't finish it. And then you've got Snape, who I think is primarily motivated by his love for Lily. And that's what caused him to do what he did, to act in the way he acted. I think he was obviously, like, even at the end of his story, when he's talking with Dumbledore for the last time, we get that flashback. And he offers that Patronus charm, and it's the same as Lily's, which that signifies that you have a great affection or love for another wizard when your Patronus turns into that other wizard's Patronus charm. So even after all those years, his love for Lily was still completely alive. So I think anytime he looked at Harry, I think he saw Harry's dad, but throughout the book, people always say, you have your mother's eyes. And I think when he saw Harry's eyes, he saw Lily in that. And that's got to be difficult. And I'm sure he was experiencing grief and all the emotions. But, it's not an easy question to answer.
No, not at all.
But that's a good point you made, like how we may not ever answer this, but that's why these books are so held, they're so held tight to our, by everyone. You can read, everyone that read these books had a vastly different experience and a vastly different opinion on things, right? You might ask two different people about the same question and they could have a totally different answer. And that's fun. That's great. That's why we come back to this world.
Yep, absolutely. Well, anything else y'all want to discuss or talk about in the world?
I want to throw one more. We talked about what actor portrayed a character, earlier, and I forgot about this till right now. But Maggie Smith as McGonagall,
great,
crushes it. She's another one where when I read the books, sometimes I can change the person's physical appearance in the book with my own mind, but she's McGonagall, 100%.
Yeah,
well said.
Definitely.
Yep, for sure. And there's just so much we didn't cover. There's characters we didn't talk about and themes that are throughout the book that are, huge, that obviously this is not a comprehensive discussion on the subject, but it's been so good talking with you guys. I've enjoyed it. Maybe we can do another one again. Star Wars.
We can do Avatar.
Yeah.
Avatar.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we'd love to come back. Me and Matt are obviously very knowledgeable. I keep bringing us back.
We know things.
We're basically Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings scholars, But no, we thanks for having us on. We'd love to come back.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Methodical Methodist Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, I hope you might consider heading on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review of the show. It is very much appreciated. And until next time, stay methodical.